Today's going to be a treat. We're going to have a rare lecture about rare plants by a rare person. She's always been on the rise, having been born in an elevator at Fort Bragg. Then she moved to Marion, a Red Raider. Were they still Red Raiders when you did?
Now Titans.
Oh, I just dated myself then, I guess. Sorry. Misty Buchanan now works for the Natural Heritage Program. She graduated from the School of Arts and Sciences. Then she went to Smith College. Then she went to the school down the road here. But after she got out of that school, she got a modicum of class by going to work at the Botanical Gardens. But it was only for a year. And then she went to work for the Natural Heritage Program. She is one of the best field botanists around. I should back up. She got her BS degree in biology and her master's degree of science in botany. She is a great field botanist. You usually will see her in this pose with a green tattered Radford that she has used. The pages are tattered, they're dirty, but she can really identify plants until Alan Wakely changed all the names. Now she can't carry his book around like she used to. Let's see, she joined the Natural Heritage Program staff in 2003, and she has worked as a botanist for 7 years, and now she is the Natural Heritage Inventory Manager, and that's 2010 you took over. All of you get your pencils and papers out because she's going to give us all the GPS coordinates of all the rare plants in the She lives in Durham with the love of her life, Andrew, and her 2 children, ages 3 and 1, which now sometimes you'll see her carrying children instead of Radfords. Misty.
Great, thank you, Tom. I'm going to see if we can figure out how to dim the lights, because I've got some plant photos here that would probably look better if there's a little more contrast. That's good. That's good, thank you. I'm using a microphone because my voice is kind of weak. I'm getting over a cold, so wave at me if I'm getting too loud or too quiet. Is this a good sound so far? Good level?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. It's nice to see such a large crowd. Even while the fair is in town, I was a little worried about how parking and traffic would be for people and whether people would just decide to go to the fair instead of coming over here as long as they were here. But thanks for coming this morning. Before I talk about I am going to talk a little bit about some of the rare plants of the state. That was what Bobby asked me to talk about. But I'm so excited about the Natural Heritage Program and the work we're doing. I'm going to begin by saying a few words about the Natural Heritage Program and all of the kinds of information that we can provide for you, for people who are interested in rare species and natural areas in the state. And then I will talk some about some of the rare plants. Okay, so the Natural Heritage Program is a state agency. We're within the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And within that, we're within the Office of Conservation Planning and Community Affairs. And we're really specifically interested in conservation and planning for the most part with the Natural Heritage Program. So our mission is to basically inventory the state's natural resources and find out what is here, what plants and animals and natural communities are within the state. And then we keep track of the rarest and most standing elements of natural diversity. And so for us, those elements are species, plant and animal species, as well as natural communities, which are the habitats where those common and rare species occur. And so we keep track of 738 species of plants across the state and 559 species of animals. And that means we go out and survey and look for them. We also maintain a database of observations about all of those locations, as well as GPS coordinates, which we are willing to share. But I'm not going to share them this morning. And also we map them and we work with the landowners to try to encourage them to protect them in whatever way they're able to do. So we like to say we keep track of the species of the state from the showiest to the lowliest. And when I put this slide together, I was thinking of smooth coneflower, which is the one on the left here, which Echinacea levigata. I was thinking of that as one of the showiest species, but actually one of my friends recently told me that she took her sister out to one of the largest populations of this plant, and she made the comment that it looks droopy. So I guess you can't win them all, but I think it's a really beautiful plant. And this is a federally endangered plant, which is really endemic to the Piedmont of North Carolina, a little bit into Georgia, and a little bit into Virginia as well. And then, of course, the least trillium, which is a very small trillium, which is, there are several different varieties, and each one of those varieties is extremely rare in North Carolina. And then the dwarf-flowered heartleaf, which is a federally endangered plant, it gets a lot of attention and a lot of resources, even though it is also a very lowly plant and very difficult to identify. But I think Tom Harville is, he's got a lot of information about how to identify the different heartleafs in North Carolina. So we also keep track of natural communities, and we can think of natural communities as habitats for common and rare species. You could call them, we could say that they are the basket in which all of the species occur. And so even in North Carolina, even though we don't know still what all of the species are in our state, our hope is that by focusing on protecting all of the different examples of natural communities, we will, in the end, also protect all of those things that we don't even know are here yet. And so examples of that would be things like mesic forests, granitic domes, of course the longleaf pine flatwoods, and also blackwater swamps. And so we have about 300 types of natural communities in the state that we keep track of. And we have maps as well of all of the best examples of those natural communities, as well as what common and rare species are associated with each one. And then our ultimate goal is to identify the sites that are most important for conservation, and we call those significant natural heritage areas. And those are basically areas of land or water that are important for the state's biodiversity. They usually have at least one example of a rare species and or a high quality natural community. Usually they have multiple of those occurrences within each significant natural heritage area. And we consider those to be the critical piece for conservation work in the state. When we work with our partners to protect locations, we aim for the significant natural heritage areas. And so these sites are identified by ground surveys. We don't really use modeling. I know modeling is very popular, especially among the university researchers, to try to predict where important things are. But we actually go out on the ground and see things with our eyes to make sure that those places really are important. And the significant natural heritage areas can range in size depending on what the important feature is at that site. So they can be as small as 1 acre, which would be our mountain bogs. Some of our mountain bogs that have bog turtles are very small in size, but they're still important for those species that occur there. And then also we have some sites that are thousands of acres. So some examples of significant natural heritage areas would be places like the Green Swamp or Roan Mountain, Cape Hatteras National Seashore, so all kinds of places across the state. And let's see, we identify these as important for conservation, but being designated as a significant natural heritage area does not protect it in any way. The protection comes from the landowner if the landowner is willing to do anything for protection. So this map shows where the significant natural heritage areas across the state, and we do have areas all across the state. You can see they're concentrated on the margins of the state in the high mountains and also on the outer banks, but we have significant natural heritage areas in every county where we work to get those areas protected. And then we also rank them by priority for conservation. So the nationally significant sites would be sites that have some of the best examples in the whole country of whatever occurs in that location. And then the state significant examples would be some of the best examples in the state, and so on down. We also have regionally significant and county significant areas as well. So that our partners who we work with, if it's a local land trust who works within a region, they can focus within, the particular region where they work. Or if it's a county government, they can look specifically at the county level to see what's most important for them. So one of our main activities is to gather and store information, and then also, of course, to share it as well. We have 10 field biologists who do field work, and they are the primary source of our information, but we also rely very heavily on our partners. So that includes partner agencies, federal and state agencies, as well as consultants, researchers, students, and naturalists. Also volunteers with groups who are willing to do surveys for free and just send us the information they have. We're constantly looking for information to help us keep our data as up-to-date and useful as possible. And so most of the county inventories are funded through grants. The Natural Heritage Trust Fund is our primary source of funding. We do not have a line item in the state budget bill, so we have to, every couple of years, we go back to the Natural Heritage Trust Fund and ask for money to continue to support our work. We also get grants wherever we can. We've currently got a grant from the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Program, which is funded through EPA, to do a survey in the Roanoke River Basin. But we've also gotten grants from the Native Plant Society, the North Carolina Association of Environmental Professionals, NatureServe, the Nature Conservancy, any kind of group that is willing to help us. We are willing to. We've always got our hand out looking for more. And in fact, this group this morning, the funds that were paid for me to come here are going to the Natural Heritage Program as well. So the current projects that we have going on are the county inventories. Again, that's sort of the major emphasis of our field work. We've got a survey going on in Wilkes County that is just beginning. It's going to be a 2-year project, and James Padgett is doing that survey. This is James standing here in a bottomland forest, an old tree. Ed Schwartzman is conducting a survey of Graham and Cherokee counties, and he has been our man in the southern mountains for the last few years. I think Ed will be giving a presentation to the Friends of Plant Conservation Program in November in Asheville, and Ed is a really good speaker and a really good field biologist. Sean Oakley is doing a survey of Mitchell County. He's wrapping that up, and the report will be finished next spring probably. And then Bruce Sorey has moved his operations to Dare and Terrell counties, and he's doing a 3-year project to survey those 2 counties. And then we're also transitioning into doing some surveys of ecological regions of the state. And right now we're Harry LeGrand and Steve Hall are doing a 2-year project looking at the Roanoke River floodplain area. So when we do inventories of counties, again, we're inventorying the biological resources of the county, and it's a 2-year process for us. We spend the first year coordinating with partners, gathering information about what their survey priorities would be for us, as well as we look at aerial photos and topo maps and try to identify large intact natural areas that might be important. And then we contact landowners to gain access and get permission to survey their land. And then we begin our field work during year 1. And we do not survey anyone's lands without permission. And so even the state agencies and federal agencies, we coordinate with their staff to make sure they know where we're going, and also to make sure that our work will be useful to them as well. And then during the second year, we do the second season of field work, and then we analyze and map our results. And we write our report, and then we follow up with landowners and partners to let them know what we found and try to see if we can get some conservation action going based on our results. So this map shows the state of the county inventory process in North Carolina. We're really almost finished. The counties that are in white have been completed, and we have reports on each of these counties, and many of them, well, most of them we have bound copies that are available for distribution. You can also download them from our website. And then the counties that are in the hatching are the ones I just described that are currently ongoing. And so there will, at the end of this process, I think at the end of the next 3 years, the only things left to do will be Swain and Clay County. And so after we complete those, then we hope to really start focusing even more on ecological regions instead of the county political boundaries, so we can have more analysis across the county lines to understand some of the ecological processes that are going on. So there are 3 ways to access our data and our results of our survey work. Number 1 was the county inventory reports I just talked about. We have paper copies. Anybody can contact me and I can let you know if we still have copies for the counties of interest to you. You can download the electronic file from our website, and here's our website address, www.ncnhp.org. And we have all kinds of map tools available on our website where you can go and look up information. And then we share GIS maps with our partners who work with GIS so that they can overlay our data with whatever maps that they find useful to them so they can use it in their planning. So our hope is ultimately to share information that can be useful for conservation decision making. So this is a picture of our county inventory reports. They're not really flashy, but they have a lot of really good information. Mostly maps and words, no pictures. And this is what a report would look like. This is taken from the Durham County Natural Areas Inventory. And so you can see the boundary of the significant natural heritage area, and then we have a description of the important features. So we spent about 6 months revamping the Natural Heritage Program website. And we're really proud of the outcome. This is a screenshot of our home page. And I just wanted to show you a couple of things that are useful from our website for those who are interested. We have a really neat feature called a map viewer, which is based on Google Maps. And it's if anybody used our old website, I think our new map viewer is much easier for people to use. But this allows people to go and search an area and find out what rare species are near their area of interest. So if you go to our homepage and click on the map viewer up here, then you have the opportunity to type in you can either enter coordinates or you can type in an address into the search field and click the search button, and you'll get a map with a circle, which is a 2-mile radius around your area of interest. So Ralston Arboretum here in the middle, we get a 2-mile search radius, and you can get a list of all of the element occurrences, which is our lingo for pretty much rare species occurrences or natural communities. Also, you can get a list of the significant natural heritage areas within that 2-mile radius or the conservation managed areas. And managed areas pretty much would be any area that is managed for conservation. So that would be nature preserves, county parks, state parks, game lands, any kind of unit that is managed for conservation in some way. So this could be, most of these are open to the public, not all of them. So you'd still need to do a little research before you visited, but these are often good places to visit to find out, to see some natural areas. So after you do your search, here I just did a search for the element occurrences within 2 miles of the Ralston Arboretum, and we generated a list. And so we see here there are 7 rare species within 2 miles of where we are right now. And you can also get a little bit of information. We've got invertebrate animals, vascular plants, vertebrate animals, scientific name and common name, and then the status of whether the occurrence is considered to be historical or current, as well as the mapping accuracy. Some of these are based on herbarium specimens or museum specimens where we don't really know for sure exactly where they came from. So the idea here is things with low accuracy, they may or may not have actually been within 2 miles of where we are right now. The very high accuracy things, we know exactly where they were. We feel pretty confident about how they were mapped. And then we've got the state status and federal status. Those are the legal protection status, either from the Plant Conservation Program or the Wildlife Resources Commission for state status. And then federal status comes from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then the state rank and global rank are ranks that are assigned by NatureServe, and they're meant to give you a sense of how rare the species really is. So one of the things that leaps out at me right away is that we have a federally endangered plant right here within 2 miles of the Ralston Arboretum, and that is Michaud's sumac. And so If you wanted to learn more about that species, you could go to our database search page. And this is also something that you can get right to from our homepage. So if you typed in the scientific name or common name of the Michaux sumac and then and wanted to learn about its occurrence all across our state, you could just type it in right here and then hit search, and then you could get a map showing all across the state where Michaux sumac occurs. So here the green counties are the counties where the species is currently located, and the red counties are historical places where the plant historically occurred, and now they're the plant is thought to be extirpated from those counties. And you can also get a little bit of information about the kind of habitat where the species occurs. Here at sandhills, sandy forest, and woodland edges. And if you click on a county, then it'll also give you the county name for the county. And then this just shows you an example of the GIS data that we share with our partners who use GIS, where you can overlay our significant natural heritage areas and element occurrence records over topo maps or aerial photos or soil maps or whatever would be of interest to the user. So all in all, we have 26,000 element occurrence records that we try to keep track of, and we try to keep them up to date, but it is a constant struggle. And we also have 2,400 significant natural heritage areas that we also are working to try to get protected. So that's all I'm going to talk about the Natural Heritage Program. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of information about some of the locations within North Carolina and some of the rare species that we track. I guess we'll just have questions at the end, questions or comments, but if anybody wants to shout out, you're welcome to. So one of the things we've done recently is we've reviewed all of our 2,400 significant natural heritage areas to make sure that our rankings were appropriate for them. And so we've been able to analyze what species are there. And one of the questions that I had is which sites are most important for element richness? And what that really means is which sites have the most examples of rare species or natural communities. So does anyone want to guess? So I'm going to give you the top 10 sites in North Carolina for rare species. Does anybody want to guess what some of those might be?
Green swamp.
Green swamp, okay, that's good. I think that's on our list of top 10. Fort Bragg, yes. Mm-hmm.
Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, Smoky Mountains, right. And Smoky Mountains, currently the Smoky Mountains is ranked number 2. It's got 108 occurrences, and Roan Mountain has 110. But I have a feeling once we actually spend the time to go through the whole species list for the Great Smoky Mountains, it will probably move up to number 1 on our list. But one thing you can see right away is that these top 10 sites range in size from 276,000 acres, which is the Great Smoky Mountains, all the way down to 1,600 acres down here in the Whitewater River Falls and Gorge. So Roan Mountain and Grandfather Mountain and Bluff Mountain are all high elevation mountains that have a collection of species that are endemic to the southern Appalachian Mountains. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, of course, is a very large area, and we're still learning about what occurs there. Fort Bragg Natural Area is managed. Fort Bragg has a very strong conservation emphasis in their management, and so they're able to work with us, and they have a large team of biologists who work to protect the resources and make sure that the natural areas are protected, even as part of the military mission. Long Hope Valley, I think, is the only site here that really has the least amount of protection. Elk Knob State Natural Area partially protects this area, but Long Hope Valley, there's a lot more conservation work that could be done here, and it's one of the most important sites for mountain box in western North Carolina. Of course, Grandfather Mountain is protected by state parks and the Nature Conservancy. Holly Shelter Game Land is in Pender County, and Onslow County has a good collection of species associated with longleaf pine and the green swamp. And then Bluff Mountain is owned by the Nature Conservancy, and Whitewater River Falls and Gorge and Horse Pasture River Gorge are both within the Nantahala National Forest, and they're in Transylvania County. And they are sites that are really important for mosses and bryophytes. They have very rugged, humid gorges, which are just a wonderful place for the mosses and bryophytes. So, and those, a lot of work was done by Ed Schwartzman in these two areas when he was doing his Transylvania County survey. So now I'm going to talk about rare plants finally. In North Carolina, we have about 5,000 species of native plants, and that number is very much a plus or minus kind of thing here. We're still learning about what occurs here. But we have 738 rare species, as I said, so about 1 in 7 plants in our state is rare. And that's fairly consistent with a lot of the states around us as well. There are 20 species that are endemic just to North Carolina. 20 species are known from less than 5 populations globally. So, we believe that every occurrence of either of these species are very important for us in North Carolina to pay attention to, because they have such an important contribution to the global diversity, not just our state's diversity. And it's really incumbent upon the people of North Carolina to protect these really for the rest of the world. So now I'm going to give you my top 10 list of the rarest plants of the Piedmont. I thought about giving you, sharing some more information about these two groups, but a lot of these are in the mountains or in the coastal plain. And I wanted to just sort of underline the point that even here in the Piedmont, really even in our own backyards almost, there is a lot of, there's a huge amount of diversity and a lot of rare species. And so I think it's just really interesting to see what occurs here. So now if you want to, probably we could debate which ones are really the 10 rarest species. If you ask 10 botanists, they give you their own top 10 list, but I got to do it today, so. Number 10 on our list of the top 10 rarest plants in the Piedmont is Torrey's mountain mint, and this is Pycnanthemum torreyi. And you can see this species is a federal species of concern, which does not actually give it any legal protection. And it's tracked by the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program as significantly rare, but it's not protected in any way by the Plant Conservation Program. And I think that this is really kind of indicative. Most of the species on this list are not protected in any way. And I think that gives you a little bit of an inkling about the fact that our state and federal laws for protecting species are a little bit of a political process and don't necessarily capture the very rare species in our state. And part of that is because we often don't know enough about them to really say that they should be protected. And part of that is just because there's a huge backlog of rare species that our state and federal agencies are working to protect, and these just don't make it to the top of the priority list for some reason. So this Torrey's mountain mint has 4 extant occurrences in North Carolina, and 3 of them are in Chapel Hill. And there's also a historical location in, I think it's in the Battle Park area, around the beautiful neighborhood of Chapel Hill. And then there's one in Duke Forest, and then a couple locations scattered around Chapel Hill. And one location in Caswell County. And then other than that, we have several specimens that were collected during Radford's time from around the state, but we've not been able to relocate these. And this species is considered to be critically imperiled throughout its range. And the thing about it is that it occurs, that we know of, on roadsides and utility easements, and these places are really hard places to protect because they need to be mowed or in some way managed for open areas for the road and utilities. So we'll have to be creative about finding ways to protect them if we want to protect them in their natural habitat. So at number 9 on our list is our only endangered plant, or federally or state protected plant that is going to be on this list, and that is Harperella, Ptilimnium nodosum. Actually, this name is now out of date. I checked Weekly's 2012 manual, and it is now Harperella nodosa. But the Fish and Wildlife Service officially listed as Ptilimnium nodosum, so we're going to follow the Fish and Wildlife Service until they change their name. But this species only has 1 extant occurrence in North Carolina, and that is on the Tar River in Granville County. And you can see it's a very small plant, and it grows in rocky bars and rivers, and it's very subject to the effects of flood scouring and deposition and any kind of hydrological changes, which might dump a huge amount of sediment on top of the small plants, or changes that might cause erosion that would wash the plants away. There was one historical location on the Rocky River in Chatham County, and that population declined over a number of years, and finally Marge Boyer removed a few of the plants because she could see the writing on the wall for that population, and she took those plants to the North Carolina Botanical Garden, and the staff at the Botanical Garden were able to keep those alive over the years. And just recently they reintroduced those plants back to the Rocky River, and they tried a couple of different treatments to stabilize the soil where they put the plants in the hopes that they would be able to persist over time. I think they've been in the ground about 5 years and they're doing really well. And I think the week after they actually planted the plants in the Rocky River, it was just a huge process of getting the permission to plant the plants and studying and finding just exactly the right location and getting together all of the different kinds of stabilizers they were going to put in the ground. They finally did that, and they planted the plants, and the very next week there was a huge flood, and the plants were underwater for several days. But they actually survived, and they did fine, so they're pretty adaptable. But still, only one extant population, one reintroduced population in the state. At number 8 on our list is a moss. And do we have any people here any bryologists or moss lovers here? Well, this is kind of a problem because there are not a lot of people in the state who study mosses, and we actually do have quite a diverse assemblage of mosses, especially in our mountains. And we do have Duke University, and Duke has a really wonderful program for bryology. But aside from that, there are not a whole lot of people who study mosses, including myself. I would not know this if I, stepped on it. But that's part of the problem. We need to learn more about these. We have one extant location in Rutherford County at Box Creek Wilderness at a site that was recently protected by a landowner who wanted to buy land for conservation. And the only other location that we know of is at Mitchell's Mill in Wake County, and we have been able to get some folks from Duke to go resurvey for it and have not been able to relocate it. But the thing about this species is that there are only 2 locations in all of North America that we know of. And this is actually a plant that is pretty well studied, and there are good specimens at Duke, so people at Duke who wanted to study it could easily learn how to identify it and survey for it. And then aside from these locations, it occurs in Central America and in Europe. And it's rare throughout its range. Each of these countries has only 1 or 2 occurrences, and they've been well studied in Europe, and they're still considered to be very rare. So still rare throughout its range. And so this is a species that we really need to learn more about, how to identify it, and then what its needs are. Because apparently it has gotten extirpated even from Mitchell's Mill, even though that's a protected site. So at number 7 on our list is Desmodium octroleucum. And this is in the pea family. There are about 300 species of Desmodium, and they're notoriously difficult to identify. There's one species called Desmodium perplexum, and I think that is a really good name probably for a lot of species that are in this genus. But Desmodium octroleucum is really not that hard to identify because most of the Desmodiums have seeds that are little triangles, and we call them hitchhikers, and they'll stick to your pants and your socks every time you go in the woods, especially at this time of year. This Desmodium only has those little hooked hairs on the very outer margins of the seed, so they're not really that sticky. So, if you could just look at the seed with your hand lens, that would be a really good clue right there about whether or not this is the right species. But that might be its problem. It's not getting around very well, not like the other Desmodiums, because it only had those little hairs. It's known historically from Duke Forest in Orange County from 1960. Oh, that's another thing. This species has not been seen in the state since 1960. And so I think it'd be really fun to try to relocate it. There was a historical location for it up in, it looks like I've got some cut off down here, but there's a historical location for it up in Granville County at Camp Butner, and I think there's probably a good opportunity to find it up there if we could just relocate it. But this is rare throughout its range, only 13 populations known from Maryland down to Florida and Alabama, and no current populations here in North Carolina that we know of. At number 6 on our list is another bryophyte, Liverwort. And again, this is not one that I could identify, but there are people in the state who could, and there are 5 extant locations that we know of. Three of these are in Watauga County up in the Boone area, and 1 in McDowell County. And then there are 4 more historical locations, and one of the current locations may also be protected in that Bob's Creek Pocket Wilderness, which is up in McDowell County. So this is a species that grows along moist banks along rivers and streams and near waterfalls, and so hydrological changes we're thinking might be the most likely threat for this species. Number 5 is Piedmont Fameflower, and this species was only recently scientifically described and published. For a long time it was just known as Phemeranthus species 1. But this is a neat little plant. It has a beautiful flower. My picture does not do it justice. And there's only one location in North Carolina for it, which is at South Butner Cedar Glade, which is owned and managed by the Plant Conservation Program. And there's also one location in Virginia for it. And those are the only 2 populations that we know of globally for this species. This one is a little bit tricky because it flowers in August, and the flowers are only open from 3 until 7 p.m. And it grows in these glades, so you really have to sit right out there in the sun in the hottest part of the day and the hottest month of the year and just wait for it to open its flowers so you can see how many stamens there are. But it's worth it because it's really pretty. I think David Blevins has some really good pictures of this, and he really put in the time to actually wait for it to flower. And so it was formally described in 2001, and we think the main threats for this are what we would call stochastic issues, and that's just our way of saying if there's only one occurrence in the whole state, anything could happen to it. We have no idea if it's really protected, something that we can't even think of, trampling or who knows what. 4-wheelers could go in there and tear it up and then it would be gone. And number 4 on the list is a plant that we actually thought was extinct for a long time. I think for many, many years, this plant, the Yadkin River goldenrod, was thought to be extirpated. The only place in the world that it's known from is along the Yadkin River in Montgomery and Stanley County, right around the 2 dams there, the Baden Dam and the Falls Dam. And the thought was that when those dams were installed, that they flooded this plant and that it was gone. But in the early 1990s, Alan Weekly, when he was working with the Natural Heritage Program, went out and did a survey and relocated it. And over the years, we've been able to work with Alcoa, the aluminum company, and Progress Energy to make sure that as they make changes in the hydrological regime of the dam there, that they're not flooding out this species. And it does grow above and below the dam. There's one population at Morrow Mountain State Park down below the dam, and then several locations right around the dam, and this is what it looks like. And you can see that it's right on the rocks, right at the edge of the water, and so if they were to really flood it out, this plant would really be threatened. This species is a candidate species, which means that it's very close. It's one of the next on the list to be federally listed as endangered or threatened, but it is not formally protected at this time. And so that is sort of a little bit of a carrot that the Fish and Wildlife Service is able to use in working with Progress Energy. And the landowners there, if they're willing to voluntarily do things to protect the species, then it will not need to be federally listed. And so, but Progress Energy has been really good about working with us over the years to protect their rare species populations anyway. Number 3 is smooth-seeded hairy nutrush. And see, I think part of our problem is we just don't come up with catchy names for these plants. They really don't evoke a whole lot of, your imagination. I think butterfly people really have the best names, and we need to take a page from their book. Hopefully, this species has not been formally identified and published yet. I believe that Alan Weekly is working on that with some of his students. But maybe they'll change the common name when they give it a scientific name as well. But that name actually is pretty well descriptive because it's a nutrush, a Scleria. The common name in general for Scleria is nutrush. It has very hairy bracts and hairy stems, and the seeds are smooth. These two seeds are the smooth-seeded hairy nutrush, and they're smooth. And then the closest one and the key to it does have very bumpy seeds. And this is something that you have to look at with the hand lens in order to identify. But it occurs in North Carolina in the McLean Savanna, which is protected by the Nature Conservancy, and Sandy Run Savannas, which is owned by state parks. And there's one historical location at Camp Butner as well. And Camp Butner was much larger than it is today, so it really could be anywhere, in the Butner area of Granville County, just hanging out still. But it has not been observed within, I think the collection from this was in the 70s maybe, so nobody's been able to relocate it since then. And this is just an herbarium specimen, which is why we know that it occurred here at all. So as far as we know, all of the sites that are known are protected, but we still need to relocate it in Butner. And number 2 is a beautiful plant, Marshallia, and again, this species is not well known and it was only recently discovered, so it has not yet been given a name. But there's one population in Virginia of it as well, and then one extant population at Picture Creek, which is protected by the North Carolina Plant Conservation Program. And there's another historical location somewhere in Granville County that also has not been relocated. It has a beautiful flower, and it's very distinctive. It's the kind of thing that if a botanist did see it, they should be able to identify it, and it's so showy, but we just haven't been able to find more locations for it. So wherever it is in Granville County, that's another area that would be great for surveying it and relocating it. So our number 1 rarest plant in the Piedmont, does anyone want to make a guess? Well, what's that? Echinacea, that's a good one, but it's not on our list. It is a Quillwort, which is also not very charismatic, unfortunately, but it's called Isoetes virginica, and it is G1S1, which means that there are very, very few populations globally for this species. There's only one current population that we know of in North Carolina, and that is on private land in Person County. This is what it looks like. I did not take that picture, and I've never seen it. The thing about quillworts is that they don't actually have pretty flowers, and they just have spores, and so you have to be able to identify the species based partially on the spores, and their spores are at the base of the plant, so you kind of have to disturb the roots in order to even identify it, and people, don't really want to do that to something if they don't think it's really going to turn out to be, worthwhile. But we have one extant population on private land and then 3 historical locations that need to be resurveyed. And we know that one population was flooded out when Jordan Lake was created. So this is another case where we just need to understand collectively, we need to understand quillworts better and then do more surveys and work to get that one site protected as well. So I just wanted to give you those to just sort of spark your thinking about some of the rare jewels that are still here in the Piedmont that do need work. And there are a lot of opportunities for protection here in North Carolina as well. We have a number of trust funds who give funding for conservation purchases. The Natural Heritage Trust Fund gives funds each year, usually once or twice a year, to state agencies to buy land for conservation. That's really the main trust fund that has bought land for state parks, plant conservation program, wildlife game lands, and Division of Forestry, as well as some of the conservation lands purchased by the zoo. They sort of work behind the scenes for conservation. You don't often hear about the Heritage Trust Fund, but you do probably are familiar with many of the locations that they have protected over the years. Also, the Clean Water Management Trust Fund is specifically interested in protecting lands to protect water quality, and they give grants to state agencies as well as to local municipalities, county governments, city governments for restoration and preservation. And then the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund funds a lot of the work that State Parks does, as well as private partners across the state who are working to put in trails and protect land for recreation, and then the Farmland Preservation Trust Fund as well. And then we also have a number of land trusts who work with the trust funds and also with private donors and private landowners across the Piedmont to protect sites wherever they can. So that's all I have for a presentation this morning, but I'll be glad for questions or discussion. We can turn on the lights again.
Are there still cranberries growing in northwestern mountains, and so what's the status of those?
Yes, cranberries are, they are rare in North Carolina. We have maybe 20 extant populations or so. We have 1 or 2 locations in the very northeastern North Carolina, like at Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge has a couple locations. But for the most part of North Carolina, they do grow in the mountain bogs, and they're such diminutive plants. It seems like the populations have declined over recent years, the ones that have been known about historically. Some of the state parks have them at mountain bogs, but they're really not sure how to manage for them. So they're so small, they just get outcompeted by a lot of the larger plants in those bogs. But that is a rare oak. That's Quercus prinoides. That occurs in North Carolina. It's rare. It's a little bit more common. It actually grows all the way up to Cape Cod, and that's one of the main oaks you'll see at Cape Cod, out on the sandy areas. But this grows in the foothills of North Carolina, and I think at Hanging Rock State Park as well. It's one that we keep track of.
When it says dwarf, how dwarf is it?
Yeah,
It's a
I've never
relative
seen it
term,
myself,
plant,
but it's a
for the
small
plant world.
tree. It's very small, and it actually produces acorns, when it's, like head height or so. It's very small.
Cool.
Yes.
Misty, in your state map of all the counties with the orange blobs to show natural heritage areas, in northwestern Wake County, there was a fairly large blob. Do you know what area that is? It was on the map of the whole state. It was, I don't think, it was further west than the Wells property, and further north than the state forest. Okay, Wake County.
So, right
See on
here.
the western edge?
This one right here?
Yeah.
That's probably Umstead State Park.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
okay.
It looks about unsteady
Yeah.
in that general area.
Yeah. And that's considered state significant actually because of the aquatic species that are in the stream there. And I do not know anything about animals, so that's all I can say about that.
We have populations of mountain laurel and stuff in that area too that grow on the sides of the hills
Okay.
that you don't think of mountain laurel as growing down here.
Right.
But
Oh, neat.
there's quite a few populations of mountain laurel and
Okay.
Umstead.
Of the 2,400 significant areas, about how many are on public land, you know?
That's a very good question. I don't know, but I'm gonna write that down. That's something we can find out pretty easily. But yeah, that'll be my next talk, wherever that will be. It's a pretty obvious question, but yeah, that's something we need to work on.
Do you find that landowners are receptive to conservation, or do you have to convince them to
They
work with you?
usually are fairly receptive. I mean, I think part of the reason that we get good responses is, first we go through the process of getting permission to go on the land. And so people who are not interested in conservation say no, and we move on anyway. But even that is a pretty small number. Probably less than 25% of the people we ask say no. And then we've been able to find that there is usually a way to work with people to meet their goals, whatever they are. We don't come at people and say, you can't harvest these trees, or no forestry here. We just try to figure out what's the best way to meet their goals as well as protecting the species. So they tend to be very interested. Yeah, Linda?
How does the PCP program work with yours? Like their list of 419 plants is not quite the same as your list.
Right.
So how does that balance out?
Well, when they actually developed their list of 419 state threatened and endangered and also special concern species. They worked with the Heritage Program staff and botanists from across the state, and they reviewed systematically all of the species that are tracked by the Heritage Program and looked at how many extant occurrences there are, how many are protected, how threatened the occurrences are, and they were able to figure out which of those species were most threatened and most rare. And so they took that list and created the threatened and endangered list. But they work very closely with us. They get their data of where things are from us and what's protected, and then they share with us whenever they find populations. Yes?
Yeah, and for your database, are you using adapting John Cartez's floristic synthesis for most of the data?
That has historically, John Cartez's floristic synthesis, which pretty much sets the standard for the taxonomy and the names of species across the state, that has been the standard taxonomy that we have used in North Carolina, and actually NatureServe uses it for the whole country. But recently, as the Flora of North America has been published, it has updated some of the names, and we try to use the Flora of North America when we can. But when Alan Weekly's Flora is published and finally set in stone, maybe next year, I don't know, maybe a few years, we're going to use that as our standard just because he's got such a close tie with North Carolina botany. We think that he'll probably be a little bit more in tune strictly to North Carolina, whereas Cartez covers the whole country, even though he does have also strong ties in North Carolina. Yes?
When you go out to survey a county, how do you know even where to begin to look for these plants that are rare?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on the county. So, for example, when Ed Schwartzman started in Cherokee County, that county, I think, is, it's obviously farthest west in the state. It's very poorly known. I think that there are 8 other state capitals that are closer to Cherokee County than Raleigh. So it has not gotten a whole lot of attention from the botanists who are based in Raleigh over the years. So we sort of almost had to start from scratch there. We did get a lot of information from Forest Service botanists who work in that area. They told us where they knew of rare things. They also had some idea of where the most rugged areas and where the best areas. But we do a lot of aerial photo work, and we look for large tracts of land that are still forested. And we also, we use infrared photos to see where the pines are versus the green trees, because that can sometimes give us a clue. And then we also look at topography. We look for areas that would be likely to have bogs, or just depending on what would be in the state. And then we try to make contacts with local people in the area, because they also often have a lot of information. So if you all know of anybody in Wilkes County or Mitchell County or Cherokee Graham, do let us know, because those contacts are often the very most useful. Yes.
Other efforts to propagate some of these rare plants and get them into the hands of nurseries and others?
I think that there has been some interest of that. I guess that's a discussion that probably Linda and Tom can talk more about. But the Heritage Program does not really work with propagation at all. That's a totally separate thing. That we're really interested in learning where things are in the natural areas and trying to protect them on site. The Plant Conservation Program does regulate the distribution of threatened and endangered species, but a lot of the species that we track are not even threatened or endangered, so there probably are opportunities there. We would generally guide people towards looking specifically at plants that are native to their own little corner of the world, like looking at, if you live in Durham and you want to grow rare plants, look at what plants are appropriate for Durham, and then go from there.
I'd like to give her a pitch for the Natural Heritage Program, because Ed Schwartzman, James Padgett, and Jamie Oakley are 3 of the guides for the annual meeting next May. Good guys.
Yeah, they are good.
Thank you.
Okay.